For champion teams have a star player, but the real power lies in the system built around that star. Now, let's play a little game. Bring the last World Cup champions to your mind. These will probably be the first names that come to your mind. Messi, Mbappé, Ronaldo, Iniesta. All of our minds go to the stars first, because we see them in the highlights. They are in the headlines. While lifting the trophy, the cameras always film them. But let me tell you something interesting. When scientists analyzed Argentina's 2022 World Cup one by one, the thing that really caught their attention was not Messi. Yes, you didn't hear that wrong. The thing that caught their attention was how the team used Messi, because Argentina was not playing football randomly. The ball is won. It is transferred to the midfield, and it was delivered to Messi at the most accurate moment possible. This was not a coincidence. This was a pre-planned system. In football, this is sometimes called star architecture. It may sound a little complicated, but its logic is quite simple. Imagine that all the roads of a city lead to the city center. If the center is working, the city works too. But you also have to make the roads leading to the center strong. Argentina's system was exactly this. Messi was the center itself, but the roads leading to that center were at least as important as Messi. For example, Enzo Fernandez wins the ball. Mac Allister creates the connection. De Paul closes the gap. Molina opens up the flank. Then suddenly the ball comes to Messi's feet. On television, we only see the final pass. But until that pass comes, maybe 4 players are standing in the right place, which is why that position is created. This is exactly what makes the star great. Actually, the star does not shine alone. The team makes him shine. And this is not unique to Argentina. There was a similar structure in Spain in 2010. Xavi was controlling the game. But if Busquets had not established the balance at the back, if Iniesta had not found the right space, if the fullbacks had not constantly provided support, Xavi's job would have been much more difficult. So the star player is actually the visible part of the iceberg. The part carrying the real load is under the water. There is another interesting detail as well. The stars of champion teams do not try to do something individually every time the ball comes. On the contrary, sometimes the rightest move is not touching the ball at all. Yes, it sounds strange, but think. Messi sometimes does not receive the ball. Instead of that, he pulls 2 defenders onto himself. Someone else takes advantage of the space created at that moment. Maybe someone else scores the goal. But the reason for the goal is Messi's off-the-ball run. That is why, if you only watch the ball in modern football, you miss half of the game. The real story happens where the ball is not. A run made by a player. The space created by another player. A defender being 1 step late. None of these appear in the highlight footage. But these are often the details that win the trophy. Maybe that is why the value of some footballers cannot be understood by looking at the statistics. He does not score goals. He does not make assists. But the team cannot play the same game without him, because that player is the unseen gear of the system. And the moment the system breaks down, the star player cannot shine as much as before. Until now, age, ball possession. And we talked about star players. But the next common characteristic, I think it is one of the most important details that everyone who wants to understand World Cup finals should know. Because in the last 15 minutes of matches, more than the players' legs, their brains get tired. 5 matches are won with the brain, not the legs, in the last 15 minutes. Now let me ask you a very simple question. When do you think a footballer gets the most tired? Most of us give the same answer. After the 80th minute. And we are right. But we know only part of it. Because when scientists examine GPS data, heart rates, and the players' decisions during the match, they notice something very interesting. The biggest problem players experience in the final minutes is actually not their muscles, their brains. Yes, you did not hear that wrong. In the final part of the match, the first thing to give up is often not the legs. It is the decision-making mechanism. Just think. You are constantly running for about 90 minutes. You are following your opponent. You are looking for open space. You are checking the positions of your teammates. You are listening to the referee. You are feeling the pressure from the stands. At the same time, you have to make a decision in perhaps as little as 1/10 of a second. Shoot? Pass? Dribble? Should I go back? The human brain cannot do this at the same speed forever. This is what is called mental fatigue. And in tournaments like the World Cup, where the pressure is at its highest, this effect is felt much more strongly. Maybe you have noticed it too. Some players play flawlessly in the first half, but toward the end, they suddenly misplace even the simplest pass. They send the ball out for a throw-in even when there is no pressure on them. They forget their marking, or they commit an unnecessary foul. We look at this from the outside and say, "What did he just do?" But most of the time, the reason is not a lack of technique. It is that the brain is no longer working at the same speed. Scientists give an example of this. Normally, a player can see 5 or 6 options around him at the same time. But when mental fatigue increases, this number decreases. So the player is actually looking at the field, but he no longer notices some runs, as if his field of vision has narrowed. That is why defenses break apart more easily in the final minutes. Because a delay of just half a second by a single player can disrupt the entire defensive structure. This is exactly what is behind many of the crucial goals we see in World Cup finals. Not an amazing dribble, not an amazing shot, just one player making a decision 1 second too late. And sometimes that 1 second changes the history of a country. The even more interesting part is this. Some coaches do not make substitutions just to rest a tired footballer. Onto the field, they are putting a fresher brain. Because in the last 15 minutes, what changes the tempo of the game is often not speed, but players who can make the right decisions. Maybe that is why some substitute players make a difference as soon as they enter the match. Because just as much as their muscles, their minds are also rested. And here we encounter one of football's biggest misconceptions. We always talk about fitness. He ran more. He was stronger. He was more durable. However, at the elite level, the thing that sometimes makes the difference is simply being able to make the right decision at the right time. So, in the most critical moments of the World Cup, matches are often won not with the feet, but with the brain. And now, the next common characteristic. I think it is one of the most surprising pieces of information on this list. Because, contrary to popular belief, the teams that win the World Cup are generally not the teams that run the most. In fact, sometimes the teams that run less and play much more intelligently lift the trophy. 6. The teams that run the most do not win the World Cup. Now, when you hear this information, you will probably say, "No way." Because for years we have been hearing the same comments after matches. The opponent ran more than us. They fought harder. Wanting it more won the game. As if the only way to lift the trophy is to cover more kilometers than the other team. But World Cup data tells a completely different story. Most of the teams that became champions are not the teams that run the most on the field. Yes, you did not hear that wrong. In fact, in some tournaments, the teams that covered the greatest distance could not even reach the quarterfinals. So why? Because football is not athletics. What matters here is not how much you run. But when you run, think of it like this. You can walk around a shopping mall all day. You will have walked for hours, but you will not have reached anywhere. Someone else, on the other hand, runs for only 30 seconds and catches the last bus. Both of them moved, but one of them made the move at the right time. In football, the situation is exactly like this. Champion teams do not spend their energy randomly. They wait for the moment when they need to run. Then they suddenly shift into a higher gear. That is why their sprints are fewer, but much more effective. Scientists call this running economy, that is, running efficiency. So the goal is not to run more, but to do more work with the same energy. There is another concept as well. High-intensity efficiency. Its meaning, to be able to use high-intensity effort at the right time. For example, think. The opposing center back is comfortable while controlling the ball. At that moment, there is not much point in pressing. But the same center back lets the ball get a little away from him, or takes it onto his weaker foot. That is that 1 second moment. Champion teams make an explosive sprint right here. From the outside, it looks as if they only ran a few meters. But those few meters sometimes change the fate of the match. This is what makes the difference at the elite level. Not the amount of running, the timing of the run. We could often see this in Germany in 2014. The players were not pressing like crazy throughout the whole match. They were waiting patiently. But the moment the opponent made a small mistake, suddenly, 4 players pressed at the same time. The ball was either won back, or the opponent was forced to kick it long in panic. On television, we often describe this by saying, they pressed well. But in reality, behind that press is timing calculated down to the seconds. And the interesting thing is this. Champion teams sometimes deliberately walk. Yes, you did not hear that wrong. They walk. Because at that moment, they are not just resting. They make it seem as if they are letting the opponent rest as well. Then, the moment the opponent thinks he has relaxed, the tempo suddenly increases. This sudden change of rhythm catches defenses unprepared. Maybe that is why, in some matches, a team looks ordinary for a long time, then scores 2 goals within 5 minutes. Because it has saved its energy for that moment. So from now on, when you watch a match, do not look only at the running distance. Pay attention to this. That sprint. Was it made at the right moment? Because the secret of the teams that win the World Cup is often not working harder, but using their energy more intelligently than everyone else. But there is a characteristic even more important than all of this. Because some teams panic after losing the ball, while others, the moment they lose the ball, win it back within a few seconds as if nothing had happened. And this is exactly one of the biggest differences that separates champions from the others. It is not over yet. We still have our last 4 points. The continuation of this video is in part 3. If you want the continuation, and if you liked this video, write it in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe.